Erick, thank you for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
You have a new book out, and it's called You Will Be Made to Care, and it's so timely right now because it's all about basically the whole fight of religious liberty, and we're seeing what's happening in Mississippi, what's happening in Georgia, what's happening in North Carolina. What do you make of all these states taking up these individual religious freedom measures?
Well, it's interesting to me that I think the left has overreached. When you poll people on religious liberty, should someone be forced into providing goods and services for a same-sex wedding, or should men be able to use the women's bathroom? Overwhelmingly, people say no, and the left is continuing to push these issues. I think it's going to actually wind up ending badly for them politically, but right now, Republicans are getting bullied by Hollywood film companies and major corporations, and they're listening to the money, not the voters.
Well, so Mississippi just passed a law, the governor signed it. Even though people have been threatening them to pull out business and the like, they're standing firm. But then in Georgia, your home state, right. Nathan Deal, the governor, wouldn't go along. Why did he back down?
He got inundated by businesses, particularly Hollywood corporations, essentially saying we want you to follow Hollywood values, not your state's values. And so he vetoed it. He's attracted a lot of businesses into the state, and he got scared. And frankly, he got overwhelmed by a corporate interest, and there really wasn't a strong presence of conservatives telling him to sign it. They just assumed he would.
Let's go to North Carolina. Same scenario going on, but this is not over a same-sex marriage thing. This is over basically bathroom rules and whether or not men can use women's bathrooms and transgenders and the like. The governor there, they're standing firm, but you've got companies threatening to pull out there.
Right. You know, it's interesting. So it started over Charlotte, North Carolina, which overreached the city municipal legislature, applying it to religious organizations and nonprofits. That was where the real overreach was. And so the state rebuked them and said, you can't do this. Men can't use the women's bathroom. It was overwhelmingly popular with the voters, but not with corporations. PayPal, for example, has pulled out of an expansion in Charlotte, North Carolina. Note they're pulling out of the expansion. They're not just shutting everything down completely. Right. And it's really ironic with PayPal because they were just fined $7.7 million for allegedly processing payments for a terrorist trying to procure nuclear weapons tech. They process payments for Iranians, Sudanese, Cubans. They do business in China and Singapore with great human rights.
I was just going to say, I mean, the hypocrisy with these companies that do business in places that, I mean, talk about the way they treat gay people. They put them to death in many cases. They're doing business in countries like that, but yet they won't do business in a state that allows same-sex marriage, because all 50 states have it now, but it's just saying we're not going to force a church, for example, to have to host the wedding. How does this make sense?
One of the companies complaining about North Carolina is expanding in Malaysia, whose prime minister just compared gay people to ISIS. But they don't want to go into North Carolina. And people forget that a lot of these major corporations are steered by people who are culturally of the left. They may do business in North Carolina, Georgia, Texas, wherever, but ideologically at the upper ranks of these companies, they're not conservative. Big business and conservatism really are incompatible these days from an economic standpoint and a cultural standpoint. Big business depends on government now to keep their competition down, and it's become more and more culturally incompatible. But people are seeing it. Small businesses in Georgia supported the legislation. It was the Fortune 500 companies that don't even have their corporate headquarters in Georgia that opposed it.
So besides telling people to get the book, You Will Be Made to Care, what would you advise people who are concerned about this issue of religious liberty?
You know, one of the things that I've seen and what we wrote about in the book, and the reason we called it You Will Be Made to Care, is what the left is trying to do is isolate conservatives, tell them they're alone, no one agrees with you, and in particular targeting your children. Say your mom and dad are outmoded, they're freaks, what they believe no one else believes. The number one step I think conservatives have to do, particularly people of faith, is they've got to be willing to invite people in their house around their kitchen table and have dinner together. Surround yourself with like-minded believers so your children realize that your ideas aren't outmoded. There are lots of people who agree with mom and dad. It's okay for me to believe this. And stop the isolation from the left. The other thing is elections do matter, and championing conservatives who are willing to stand up on these issues, and not hostily stand up on these issues, but to make sure that I do have a worldview that says men are men and women are women, and that's how God made us, and we're not going to change it.
Erick, thank you very much. Smart advice from a smart man. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.